Now, CBS 13 News is on your side at 11.
She was the wife and mother of presidents.
Beautiful, beautiful woman, just inside and out.
And improved the lives of millions of children through her efforts to boost literacy and shine a light on children's health.
I shed a tear because, they're family.
Barbara Bush has passed away at age 92. The legacy she and her husband, former President George H.W. Bush, have built and the difference they're making.
They're a rock to this community.
At the end of your life, you will never regret not having passed one more test, winning one more verdict, or not closing one more deal. You will regret time not spent with a husband, a child, a friend, or a parent.
Breaking news that is breaking the hearts of people across the world tonight. Former First Lady Barbara Bush has passed away tonight, but her legacy lives on.
Barbara Bush spent much of her adult life in the public eye alongside her husband of 73 years, former President George H.W. Bush.
We're told her husband was at her side, along with her family, until the very end tonight.
CBS 13 has team coverage live really across the country tonight, from Houston, Texas to Kennebunkport.
Let's begin with CBS 13's Jana Varnello, who's been in Houston all week on this story. Jana?
Kim, Greg, the people of Houston, the people of Maine, and the nation have had a few days to sit with the news that Barbara Bush's health was failing. Tonight around 7:30, we got the news that she had indeed passed away at the age of 92. You mentioned that President Bush was by her side. A spokesperson says he held her hand all day and was there when she went peacefully to the other side. I want to show you outside of their home now here in Houston. This is the West Oaks community. A couple of gentlemen dropped off flowers just a few minutes ago. We spoke to them. They say they knew the Bushes a little bit. Here and there they'd see them around, and it was important for them to come out tonight and just honor Barbara Bush, a woman whose legacy reaches the entire country. Sunday afternoon was when we learned she was in failing health and had decided on comfort care instead of medical treatment. The former First Lady suffered from COPD and congestive heart failure. She is survived by her husband of 73 years. It is the longest presidential marriage in history. They have 5 children, 17 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. Family was everything to Mrs. Bush, and we are hearing from some of them tonight. Her son, former President George W. Bush, released a statement saying, "Mom kept us on our toes and kept us laughing until the end. I'm a lucky man that Barbara Bush was my mother." Now, speaking to that, we heard an update from the family. A source close to the Bush family said that just last night, Barbara Bush was talking to them. She was having trouble breathing, but that she enjoyed a glass of bourbon. As for funeral arrangements, that has not been announced yet. We'll, of course, let you know when we know more about that. We do know that she will be laid to rest at the George Bush Presidential Library and Museum in College Station, Texas. It's about an hour and a half from here. Her daughter Robin is buried there. Robin died nearly at 4 years old, just about 4 years old, from leukemia. It was one reason that she became an advocate for children's health issues, and one reason why Barbara Bush Children's Hospital has its name at Maine Medical Center. It is a sad day here in Houston, a sad day for the nation. It's certainly a sad day for the people of Maine. I want to send things now to Dan Lamparello, live in Kennebunkport tonight. Dan, it's just a difficult time right now.
Jana, it speaks volumes up here. It is a quiet and somber night along the streets of Kennebunkport, an area that the Bushes have called home for years. Frequenting the streets down here. Every summer they come up here, and this area losing much more than a First Lady and a resident tonight. Many of the people here calling Barbara Bush their friend, and many of them her family as well. A big loss for this area. The news definitely spread quickly amongst the area as well of Barbara Bush's passing. While the Bushes only call this area home during the summer months, residents say the Bushes fit in here like they were locals. Many telling us they were looking forward to the couple returning here in the next few months for their summer sabbatical up here in Maine. Locals say Barbara would frequent restaurants and shops around downtown while she was here, greeting everyone with a smile like a member of the Bush family.
Well, I think we are all feeling a tremendous loss because she's been a vital part of this community for as long as I can remember, and I've been here most of my life, and I've had the pleasure of meeting both Barbara and President Bush, and I would say class acts all the way, genuine folk.
Everyone we spoke to here tonight said that this summer just won't be the same without having Barbara Bush up here. You know, this was an area they frequented for years, and they just left such a legacy, strolling amongst the streets of Kennebunkport, meeting with people. They were just friendly neighborhood folk, as the people we spoke with here tonight said. We're live in Kennebunkport tonight. I'm Dan Lamparello for CBS 13 News. Back to you.
Part of the fabric, to be sure, Dan. Well, living most of her life alongside her husband, George H.W. Bush, the former First Lady had a long life in the public eye. CBS 13's John Chrysos continues our team coverage live in Kennebunkport with a closer look at Barbara Bush's incredible legacy, John.
Here in Kennebunkport, Mrs. Bush was often seen talking to people and waving to people and also listening to those waves. You can hear the waves tonight and the tide coming in. Mrs. Bush would listen to those waves from across the way, around the bend at the home, the family compound really, at Walker's Point. She was an active member of this community. People describe her as classy and gracious and say they will really miss seeing the beloved former First Lady here this summer. Former First Lady Barbara Pierce Bush's political roots ran deep. She was a distant cousin to the nation's 14th president, Franklin Pierce, but America knew her as the matriarch of a political dynasty, the wife of the 41st president, mother of the 43rd president, and a governor.
I'd love to have a hug.
And she liked to think of herself as everybody's grandmother.
And speaking of glamour, I want you all to look at me very carefully. Please notice the hair, the makeup, designer clothes.
Mrs. Bush seldom held back her opinions. During the 2012 presidential primary elections, she even criticized the candidates from her own party.
I hate the fact that people think compromise is a dirty word. It is not a dirty word.
But her legacy is literacy. As First Lady, she launched a campaign to help people learn to read. She visited schools, reading to children, and wrote a book about her beloved family dog, a Springer Spaniel named Millie.
If more people could read, write, and comprehend, we would be that much closer to solving so many of the problems that plague our nation.
Mrs. Bush was raised in a New York City suburb. She attended a prestigious private school. She was 16 when she met George Herbert Walker Bush during Christmas break. She left college to marry Mr. Bush after he returned home a hero from World War II. She had 6 children and lost a daughter to leukemia. As the wife of a congressman, ambassador, CIA director, vice president, and president, she spent decades in the political spotlight. She preferred privacy, but still campaigned for her husband and sons and used her homespun wit to charm the press.
I have more fun on the campaign trail, and I hope you guys don't get near me. I hope you all leave me alone.
She avoided any public involvement in her husband's role as commander-in-chief, but when President Bush fell ill at a state dinner in Tokyo, White House staffers called on Mrs. Bush to calm international concern about the president's health. Her lighthearted response broke the tension.
I can't explain what happened to George because it never happened before, but I'm beginning to think it's the ambassador's fault. He and George played the Emperor and the Crown Prince in tennis today, and they were badly beaten. And we Bushes aren't used to that.
Barbara Bush will be remembered as a gracious First Lady who headed one of the nation's most prominent political families. And just for some perspective out here, Walker's Point is across that way and around the bend. It has really hosted weddings, holidays, many happy family occasions. Jeb Bush recently built a house there, and you have to imagine that come this summer, those family times over at Walker's Point won't quite be the same without the matriarch of this family. Reporting live in Kennebunkport tonight, John Chrysos, CBS 13 News.
The town of Kennebunkport is not the only Maine community mourning Mrs. Bush tonight. Her legacy reaches across the state. Her generous contributions will live on in the lives of children and families from all around Maine.
The former First Lady's connection to Maine began when she married, as she is quoted as saying, "the first man I ever kissed." George Herbert Walker Bush. She was just 19 years old, and it was 1945. That's when she and the former president began spending their summers at the family home on Walker's Point in Kennebunkport, a tradition that continued for decades.
For instance, some of us who have 13 grandchildren who come for the summer.
I spoke with Mrs. Bush in 1995, shortly after she had learned that Maine Medical Center wanted to name its new children's hospital after her.
I said to George, isn't that the funniest thing? They came to urge me to do it. I mean, something so exciting and so flattering, as though I'd say, oh no,
No, thank you.
No, thank you. They've stretched my life.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice.
The Barbara Bush Children's Hospital is a lasting legacy to a woman who knew the pain of losing a child. She and her husband lost their daughter Robin to leukemia back at a time when family visiting hours were restricted.
It makes an enormous difference. You know, George and I had a child who was sick, and we had definite visiting hours. And it wasn't really until the very end that we were allowed to be with her all the time. And that's, first of all, it helps the child. They're frightened in a hospital, and today we now know that to have parents there makes an enormous difference.
Mrs. Bush stayed connected to the hospital, combining her love of children with another of her great passions, literacy.
And the bear says, thanks.
Mrs. Bush read to children at the hospital every summer and supported literacy efforts through the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation in Maine. The foundation has donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to literacy programs all over Maine.
If we don't teach our children to read and to write and to understand, and we don't teach mothers and fathers how important parenting is, our country's going to be in terrible shape.
Over the past few years, Mrs. Bush kept a lower profile, though she and her husband continued to be active members of the Kennebunkport community. She was often seen wearing her signature pearls, even donating a strand to the George and Barbara Bush Center at the University of New England.
And Mrs. Bush gave us her pearls and her gardening hat that she uses to garden in Kennebunkport at the house. So they were really nice, I think, things that had meaning to them personally and tied to their life here in Maine.
A lifelong love of Maine that began when she found the love of a lifetime.
That's what George Bush has done for me. He's allowed me to have hospitals named after me and introduced me to all the world leaders. Pretty exciting.
And Maine Medical Center is paying tribute tonight to the former First Lady, the namesake of the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital. And that's where we find CBS 13's Sam Reed tonight, continuing our coverage. Sam.
Yeah, Greg, well, it shouldn't come as any surprise that the hospital that bears Barbara Bush's name will forever remember her legacy. In fact, over the last couple of days, we've spoken to dozens of people who tell us the former First Lady touched their lives, and many children who were treated here tell us that they have the most respect and love for her, and that was something that was reciprocated. Now, many people say her love for children was priceless. Maine Medical Center's president says everyone stood taller because they were associated with Barbara Bush.
I know the entire Maine Medical Center family and the state of Maine, and frankly the entire world is just mourning the loss of just an absolute treasure to the United States and to the world. And so we're both joyful for the incredible life that she led and the lives that she touched, and on the other hand, we're just so sad that she's not going to be with us anymore.
Now, in 1995, Barbara Bush alongside George H.W. Bush were here at Maine Medical Center when they made the announcement they would name Maine's first and only children's hospital after the former First Lady. Since then, she's visited every summer, spending time reading to the kids here. Owen Wells was the chairman of the Board of Trustees at the time. He's the one who thought the hospital should be named after the former First Lady. He says when he approached Barbara, she said she wouldn't raise any money for it, but says she would gladly lend her name.
Barbara Bush, since she was 50, had white hair, and she was sort of like everyone's grandmother. And what could be better for a children's hospital than to have your grandmother as the namesake of the hospital?
It means a great deal. She has been very generous with her time and her treasure. And it will, the legacy will continue on at Maine Medical Center and the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital.
Now, roughly 10,000 children are treated every year here at the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital. She's a staple in this community and one that will be certainly missed. We're live in Portland tonight. Sam Reed for CBS 13 News. Back to you.
And as Sam just mentioned, the former First Lady loved reading to children at the hospital bearing her name. It was that devotion to literacy that will leave a lasting impact on the state of Maine. Mrs. Bush launched the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy in 1989. Each year, the First Lady hosted an annual Maine celebration of reading. We covered the event in Arundel in September of last year. It's one of the last public appearances the First Lady and President Bush had together here in the state of Maine. Currently, the foundation supports 20 programs statewide. We spoke to one of Barbara Bush's children that day, Dorothy Bush, on what the celebration of reading is all about.
You wouldn't think that coming to hear people read is entertaining, but it's probably the most inspiring evening I've ever attended are these celebration of readings, and so I'm excited.
Barbara Bush's foundation hosted 60 reading events last year, and over the past 21 years, the foundation has provided nearly $6.2 million to hundreds of family literacy programs throughout the state.
Up next, it's not just Kennebunkport, but Lewiston, where the former First family once called home. What rare video footage shows of Mr. and Mrs. Bush going all the way back to World War II.
And a look at the family history and legacy of Barbara Bush, including how she's related to another president from more than 150 years ago.
And we are searching for some sunshine. We'll see a little bit in the way of some brighter skies tomorrow. I'll let you know how much warmer it's going to get, when to expect some rain, who's going to see a little bit of snow. Your forecast is next.
Now, your CBS 13 Weather Authority forecast with Chief Meteorologist Charlie Lopresti.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Any leftover scattered rain showers are starting to move out. The clouds have had a hard time breaking up. We've had another gray, gloomy day, but some towns saw a little bit of late day sun. This is the scene from our Portland sky cam during the late day hours here. A lot of clouds pushing out into Casco Bay. A little activity out in Casco Bay there as well. Those temperatures still left a lot to be desired. We were in the 40s for a good chunk of the day. Hey, check out the late day hours today from our Raymond sky cam here. Nice time lapse there as well. We had some low clouds, high clouds, mid-level clouds, and even a little bit of blue sky late in the day. Tomorrow, I think we'll see a little bit more in the way of blue sky. It's a mixture of sun and clouds during the course of the day. And then our next disturbance brings a round of light rain to the area on Thursday. Now, the big question I have in my mind is, do we see any wintry precip, especially at the onset? There is the chance we could see a little bit of snow, perhaps even a little bit of sleet or freezing rain, but it's a brief period. I think the dominant type of light precipitation on Thursday will come in the form of rain. So tomorrow will be a mixture of clouds and sun. I think we're bright during the morning, and then at times more clouds than sun midday and early afternoon. And for the first time since Friday, the temperatures will make a run at the low 50s tomorrow. It will be breezy, but not extreme. We'll probably have gusts around 20 miles per hour, and that will be out of the west. So that's 1:30 in the afternoon. I can't rule out a brief shower, but most towns will stay dry. Best chance for a snow shower will be in the mountains. And then on Thursday, if we see any dry hours, it's very early in the day. That's about 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. In fact, 7:30. Notice the temperature setup. This is interesting. We're in the low to mid 30s. We may be cold enough, at least briefly at the onset, to see a brief period of sleet or maybe even a few wet snowflakes early on. That's about 9 o'clock in the morning. We should transition over to rain pretty quickly, though. So if we see any freezing or frozen precipitation, it's primarily rain by afternoon. That's 6:30 in the afternoon. The mountains will hold on to snow the longest there. We could see some light accumulations of snow in the mountains and hillier terrain. Friday, I think we will see a lot of clouds in place, and then the good stuff arrives. The weekend and into early next week, 50s and even 60s make an appearance. Away from an ocean influence, some low to mid 60s are possible. That's the way things look. Amanda will have new updates first thing tomorrow morning. Guys, back to you.
As we remember Barbara Bush tonight, we're getting a look at some rare video footage of the former First Lady and her husband from the 1940s.
It's from a Lewiston museum, and as CBS 13's Marissa Bodner reports live, it turns out the Bushes spent some time in the Lewiston-Auburn area.
Well, that's right. Long before they were Mr. President and the First Lady, George and Barbara Bush lived in Lewiston briefly during World War II. They also appeared in some advertisements for the Bates Manufacturing Company, a Lewiston-based textile maker known for its best-selling bedspreads.
Here, Poppy and Barbara Bush, married couple from Yale, use it for their combination living room bedroom.
The couple was among college students brought in by the company to give their opinions about how the bedspreads might work in dorm rooms. They appeared in the Bates Manufacturing magazine as well. The film and print ad were discovered by Museum LA in the basement of the Bates Mill in 2007 and eventually sent down to the Presidential Library.
We've got several collections here that are looking to become national treasures, and I said, well, you know, there's a national treasure that we're going to be losing too, you know, so it's not just things, it's people that can be national treasures, and I think Barbara is one of those.
The museum's executive director, Rachel DeGrosier, says had they found that film even a year later, they wouldn't have been able to preserve it. She notes in that clip George tries to offer Barbara cookies not once but twice, even after she said no. She says she loved seeing that. It says Barbara was her own woman back then and never really changed. Greg?
Incredible to see that video, Marissa. Well, Barbara Bush's legacy will also live on through her family and the example of public service that she and her husband, the former president, set from a very early age. Their lives together were extraordinary. President and First Lady George H.W. Bush and Barbara Bush were married for 73 years. She's survived by her husband, their 5 children, 17 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. Born Barbara Pierce into a wealthy family in Rye, New York, she was distantly related to former President Franklin Pierce and met her husband at a society event as a teenager. They married shortly thereafter during World War II. They knew grief early when their young daughter Robin died of leukemia, but they taught their surviving children and grandchildren the lessons of resiliency, perseverance, and commitment to causes greater than themselves. Among their children, 2 rose to be governors, Jeb Bush in Florida and George W. Bush in Texas, with George W. Bush becoming our 43rd president. Her grandchildren include Jenna Bush Hager, an author and NBC News correspondent. It's a legacy of public service epitomized by the family's well-known matriarch, Barbara Bush. And up next, from the clubhouse to Gary's house.
How Barbara Bush's legacy for giving was par for the course in more ways than one.
And the connection a Maine artist has to the Bush family, what they did together every autumn in Kennebunkport.
You're watching CBS 13 News at 11.
We are seeing an outpouring of statements tonight on the passing of Mrs. Bush, including from the White House.
President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump put out a statement tonight saying, in part, she will be long remembered for her devotion to country and family, both of which she served unfailingly well. The president's thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of Mrs. Bush.
And Maine Governor Paul LePage also saying tonight, quote, Mainers hold a special place in our hearts for President and Mrs. Bush, and we will treasure our memories of her time spent in our state. She will be missed.
Continuing our coverage now on the passing of former First Lady Barbara Bush, many in the Kennebunkport community describe Mrs. Bush as gracious, kind, and down to earth. Evelyn Payne says her husband's painting of Walker's Point started a decades-long friendship with George and Barbara Bush. She says her husband Bob has done several other paintings for the Bushes, including one that hangs in their Houston home, featured on their Christmas card.
They're just wonderful, wonderful people. And not only for us, but everybody that knows them.
She says they last saw the Bushes in October. She says every year before the couple returned to Texas, they would meet for dinner at Mabel's. And nearby at the Nonantum Resort in Kennebunkport, the general manager says it's hard to imagine a summer without both the president and First Lady in town. She says Mrs. Bush was an exemplary role model.
They don't make women like that anymore, and I think that it's for not only myself, but even I have 2 daughters, and that's the type of woman you aspire to be.
Hewitt Gordon says the Bushes would often leave tourists in awe when they would stop by the resort or anywhere else in town.
The former president is well known for his love of golf and a long association with the Cape Arundel Golf Club in Kennebunkport, but so is the former First Lady. Barbara Bush was a longtime fixture at the course, where the clubhouse is known as the 41 House after her husband, the 41st president. Barbara Bush played golf herself when she was younger, but she frequently paid visits to the course up until last year, especially when it hosted events that were near and dear to her family, including the annual George H.W. Bush Celebrity Classic, which raises a lot of money for Gary's House, a home away from home for families with loved ones who are staying at Portland area hospitals.
After the break, we'll take a look at some pictures of Barbara Bush and the Bush family.
And we'll be right back.
You're watching CBS 13 News at 11.
We want to leave you tonight with some photos of Barbara Bush.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the Bush family. I'm sure many of yours are as well.